Yeah, everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Great. There's a couple of quick slides, just about kind of setting up the background here. Sometimes, like it says, think your team's fantastic. Nice and easy. Two halves of a wheel, put it together, we're rocking and rolling, right? And sometimes they're not. Um, where it does feel like if we're not careful, we end up driving our lab bus off of a cliff. Teamwork and this sort of collaboration that happens between scientists isn't a negotiation. This is from a different talk, but it's really about being mutually beneficial, where we take each other as scientists, we have skills and ideas, we put these together for new innovations, directions, and perspectives. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows all of the time. Sometimes we have things that go bad. And so really what we're talking about today is what to do when it hits the fan, as it were. And so the first thing I want to share, that's really of not trying to be witty, is this. And we take a screenshot of it, we share these slides, we do whatever we want, that's totally fine. But there are really seven basic keys to conflict resolution about time and place, managing emotions, empathy, giving everyone a voice, identifying the root cause, being willing to work together and keep lines of communications open. And so these seven thoughts are a lot of the things that we're going to talk about when we start talking here about some given scenarios and answering questions and so on. So I'm going to stop sharing. I have one other slide we'll get to at the very end. It's a takeaway message. But right now, that's pretty much all of it. So, Indira, I'm going to turn it back to you if you have anything you wanted to add as well.
No, this is a very important topic. It's something that we all struggle with at some point in our careers, and so it's great that the Caribou Interaction Score put this topic on. And I'm very curious and interested in the fact that almost all the attendees appear to be faculty and not students, which is what we anticipated, that it would be students joining in today. But we can discuss each of the case scenarios that the interaction score has put together for us from the opposite perspective, like from the faculty perspective, like how would you manage these situations if this happened with your students or in your lab. So I think it's good training for both of us, and look forward to the discussions.
All right, thank you so much for that. So we want this to be as interactive as possible today,
Yeah.
and so I'll read through some scenarios for Tykocki and Dr. Mysorekar and let them answer how they would address these scenarios. But Mariana, can we put these scenarios up, share the slides so that everyone can, I'll read them out loud, but also if everyone wants to
Yeah.
read
Sure.
along on one page.
Yep, I can get
Uh,
those.
Fantastic. And I'll go ahead and start. So, scenario one is addressing authorship conflict. So, the scenario is I'm a PhD student working on a project with another PhD student in my lab. Our advisor suggests we work on this shared project originally. Although the work was supposed to be split relatively evenly, the other student fell behind in her research. I tried to include her by attempting to make sure she could attend our meetings and keeping her informed on progress, and only recently has she begun catching up. Even so, I have done three-quarters of the work, but since she's working really hard to catch up now, she is insisting that she should be first author on the manuscript.
Hmm.
How do I navigate this situation?
Okay. I guess I can take a few comments and then have people weigh in about how they might have handled things. And so one is, so thinking potentially more from the PI's perspective. One is authorship is definitely not who's working hardest right now. Authorship is pretty categorical in terms of, experimental, intellectual, and organizational writing. There's specific criteria. So it's very important to discuss this with the students in a professional way, that these are the requirements for authorship. These are the requirements for first author, co-first or first authorship. And so it's not about like, well, you said this, I'm agreeing with you versus the other. It doesn't really, it's all about the work. And almost all of these conflict things are best resolved when the when the question is laid in front of us and everybody's looking at it from their perspectives versus it being about me or you or others, because that ends up becoming a negative thing. So as a PI, then you could lay out what the goal of the project was and what the paper is going to include in terms of the story, and what are the experiments. Were they like, somebody designing the experiments versus somebody doing a whole bunch of Western blots or immunostains, or is it data that was analyzed? But if the person who is analyzing data, they may not have seeming to do a lot of experiments, but if they brought in the data analysis that really keyed into that drove the experimental process, then that is a key element, even though it's a different kind of contribution, non-experimental. So there's many ways to sort of organize this professionally and discuss it, and not have it be an emotional thing between the two students and credit. And I will put in another point is that in general, my personal philosophy has been to be generous rather than exclusive, because when the person who had to have other people added on that they didn't like will forget it because they move on and continue on with other things. But the one who got cut out always remembers it. And so in my mind, it's just better to be inclusive, because everyone contributes in some way or the other, because they're part of your group. And so my philosophy has generally been to be more inclusive. And then in terms of first authorship, I do make, and maybe this is just me, but I do make decisions in terms of who that student is and what are their goals. If that student is going into academic things, it's far more important for them versus somebody who's made it very clear that they're going to go outside academia, because then that authorship, first authorship, whatever, doesn't mean that much to them in their next step. Whereas it means a lot to the person who's looking for a top postdoc and looking to write an F grant or a K grant. And so I do bring in those elements into place in terms of who it is, even if the experiments may be equivalent. But that's my prerogative or decision as from a bigger picture as the PI. And anyway, I'll stop there. Nathan, would you want to weigh in? And
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. Like I'm definitely a middle of the road sort of PI. Like you said, shared work. We talk about shared first authorship is a thing. So I would try my best to negotiate one way or the other of doing this. But again, with authorship, especially talking about at the beginning. Also, there have been many times where the student that does the most work isn't necessarily the one that ultimately wrote the manuscript. And so this is a manuscript we're talking about, and it's about an author. And so it's a person who's going to write that introduction, those methods, all of those things, that is ultimately going to end up thinking about where authorship goes. But this is really one of those things that is discussed early and discussed often as much as humanly possible. But it is fluid and things change like this. So really trying to understand as a PI why this student is insisting that they should be first authors is where I would certainly start.
yeah. I think Alex has a question. I just want to make one comment also, is that sometimes students ask these things without quite fully understanding what it means. And so the responsibility still falls back on the PI to really, in a very concrete way, explain how these things work. And I think, yeah, Chris Bennison's shared criteria that could be maybe a framework to start with, which make it concrete and things like, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? But ultimately, I think the PI should be able to discuss this without feeling like they're weighing in on one student's side versus the other, and that's part of us being adults, adulting. So, Alex, question from you.
Hi, it's great to see you. Seems like just last week I saw you.
I
Oh,
know,
no.
I know. Miss you all already.
I know. Okay, this is something uh is personal and also I feel like has been happening more in the field with just the advent of needing to collaborate more, which I think is wonderful, has made a lot of our work stronger and our papers bigger and longer. What are y'all's thoughts on co-first authors? And I've even, I've seen it where there's two co-first authors or now three, and trying to balance yeah, that element now too, because now it's kind of this option where I think some of us are leaning into too, and we all feel like, oh, we contributed equally to the data and the writing, and there's the different elements to the papers that are now becoming just also so much bigger, and there's more data. So I don't know what would be your perspective on that.
I'm cool with two, but yeah, I know what you mean. When we start get, at what point does four first authors just become four authors? Um, Two is as far as personally I ever go, and actually I don't do that very often. But like one of my most cited papers, I'm the second first author, right on, and it hasn't negatively impacted it. Nobody's ever been like, well, you weren't the real first author. I'm like, no, because Tykocki is alphabetically after Hepner, and that's how we decided to assign it. It really is about what you do with that, with your ability to articulate that science in public. So I'm cool with two when you really have a situation, truly probably a situation like this, where you have two students working on a very similar project together. Yeah, the experimental things get out of balance, but maybe that other person can make up for some of it with a little more of the writing responsibilities. Now we're looking, that's of a prime opportunity for co-first authorship. But yeah, especially with as broad as we get with um, this collaborations, like my collaboration with Sarah and I, we switch off last authorship depending on if there's more engineering or more physiology. I mean, it's the other end of it, right? It's last authorship, but same thing. So again, but things that we squared really early. We talked about that's how we're going to do it. With a long-standing collaboration like that. Indira?
Yeah, I think as you said, yes, papers are becoming bigger and bigger, or some papers are at least, and so then you look at the different types of contributions people have made, because if someone did a crystal structure, but then someone did the mouse model knockout of the gene, and then did the phenotyping, and somebody did all the omics analysis. Those are three different categories of work, and if people took responsibility for each of those and they contributed, and all of it in totality took that paper to coming out in a high impact journal, then they all, in my mind, deserve potentially equal authorship. I've had situations where the student did the majority of the experiments, but then really struggled with putting figures together and writing the paper and writing the discussion and everything. And so I would have another person in the lab then weigh in. So they brought in a lot of intellectual input into that, and then made the figures so that they're like top notch and rigorous, and everything. And so in my mind, they deserved a second authorship, a co-first authorship, because otherwise, without the contribution of the second person, the paper wouldn't have been done, or it would have sat on my desk for months or years and not gotten done. But the student is the one that gets to go to meetings and present that work orally, where they enjoy that process, get a lot of feedback, and so in my mind, that student got you know got a lot of out of it. So because I think it's very important to think about what our goals are, which is for students to get training. That's their goal doing a PhD, and to learn a lot, and then to communicate the science to the public who pays for our research. And so the communication can be through presentations, through abstracts, through publications, and contribution to grants to get money to support continuing the work, and so on and so forth. So I tend to look at these things holistically and see which product or which mode of communication is most beneficial to the science going forward, and the trainee to get the training that they need. And so I look at everything a lot more holistically versus strictly like you did 5 Westerns and you did 5 immunostainings, because those are technical things. But but often these things can be decided by who's the driver. The driver is the one who is really driving the project, is doing the literature search, understanding the project, and the question, like what is the question we're trying to answer, more than, because you can have an undergrad who's working with them and who's great and does a tons of Westerns, but do they deserve co-first authorship? Probably not, because they've been following, they have not been leading. So are there other comments from people, or should we move to the next scenario?
All right. Well, if no one else would like to weigh in on this, we can move to the next scenario. So the second scenario is communication with busy mentors. A first-year postdoctoral trainee feels overwhelmed. Make sure I'm not okay. Feels overwhelmed with his research mentor, Dr. Smith, and doesn't know how to improve communication with her. Dr. Smith regularly publishes in high-impact journals and won a prestigious award for teaching. During the weekly meetings, however, she gives him so many ideas, resources, and tasks to complete, he has trouble taking it all down. She uses terms and acronyms unfamiliar to him, but he doesn't want to look incompetent and inconvenience her by asking for clarification since she is so busy with her own work. He has considered seeking advice from other members of the research group, but as the new member of an established team, he feels too timid to approach the others. So, we'll.
I don't know. I feel like this was talking about me. I didn't write it, but like
all of most of us.
I feel like that was me when I joined Mark's lab in Vermont was precisely that. And I'm a pretty gregarious fellow, but yeah, totally. Since we have a pretty good mix here of we have see some more students on here and some postdocs as well. Like you can totally understand that perspective is the PI and the flip side perspective, since we have a lot of us here too for negotiating this is in those seven things, right? Is number seven is keep lines of communication open. And what that means this isn't communication, what's described here, right? What's described here is a PI talking at someone about do this, do that, do that. Here are all these acronyms. It is really important to stop and ask questions about, I'm sorry, I forget that like this is my life and you're new. Would you like me to back up a little bit? Like throw out some of these. We acronym ourselves to death, especially. I love that that's in there. But just like we work to, the whole thing in science right now, right, is explaining to the layperson what your science means so he can make sense. My education, my students that are here heard me say this, my education is an inch wide and a mile deep, right? I know everything there is to know about this one stupid thing, but I don't know squat about so many others. And so to that end, spending time, Indira, even with you, spending time talking, listening to your science and talking with you, I feel dumb sometimes that I don't understand all of it. But I also know that I'd be willing to be like, hey, what the hell is that? What did you mean? And that sort of thing. Sometimes we need to force that conversation and to give that space where you have, right, empathy, but factual. Be empathetic to that new situation for our trainees. And be willing to give them that space and almost, force them to to ask these sorts of questions. But flip side, to make sure that we're clear to our trainees that this is the sort of space where we are on equal enough footing to have a conversation, not a dictation. I think this interesting that tidbit in there about a teaching award that kind of aligns, right? Teaching very often in medical school and otherwise is that dictatorial, meaning dictating, not dictator. Didactic is the right word, right? Sort of education where it is one-way street. And so it's forcing there to be a clear and obvious two-way conversation.
Yeah, so I would, I guess, weigh in a little bit from the point of the postdoctoral fellow is that, again, what are their goals for their career? They've clearly joined this lab, which is a high impact journal, prestigious award-winning lab. And so they've come in with ambition to be part of this winning group. And so what are their career goals? Where is their project? Where would they like their project to go? And so, and they have to kind of take ownership of that. And yes, I understand that maybe the PI should definitely not be like talking at the trainee. or the scholar, but if the postdoc is like prepared going in, like this is where my project's at, this is what I'm thinking about it, and this is what I would like your feedback on, then they control the narrative. Because if they're just going in and saying and then listening with this, head deer in the headlights look, and the PI is just like got that 1 hour with them, and they're like boom, 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 thinking about ideas and throwing them out there, and the person just gets overwhelmed. I think, yes, communication issues, but also the postdoc could be going in much, much more empowered with their notes. I mean, I certainly had that experience myself, and I was, well, not as a postdoc, but as a PhD student, because I was with Jeff Gordon, whose mind goes like, 120 miles per hour. And if I see him and he would just go blah, 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 blah. And again, I would be like, I have no idea what he's saying. But what I did is then I would, do my own homework, and what is it that I want to do next, and then do my homework. And yes, like it says here, definitely talk to the other postdocs and students in the lab to make sure that I am thinking logically, and then prepare. And then I would ask for the meeting. And I met with him maybe about every 3 to 4 months. And then I was prepared with my notes. And so I tried as much as I could to then control the narrative so that he answered my questions. And then I already had my framework. So even if he threw in a lot of things, they were all inside my framework. And so I could take it back and digest it. So I think taking control of the narrative is very important, especially as an ambitious young trainee, because you have to, and then if the PI is great and throwing a bunch of ideas, that's a good thing, because that's a lot of ideas that you can jot down. And so, but I think in this situation, the person is feeling like insecure and uncertain about themselves, and they're just there in this big lab and they want to do big things, but they're very uncertain about exactly what they want. And so I would say from the postdoc to take more, to be more empowered and control the narrative, but from the PI also to be able to teach this postdoc, like, look, if you want to really do big things and have one of these high impact papers and get a prestigious award and have a career, then this is the things that you need to be prepared for, and come prepared. And so then that's how Dr. Smith could mentor the postdoc to be ready. So both ways, the postdoc can mentor up, basically manage up his PI, and then she can mentor him to be more ready, so that she's like, I just burst out a lot of things, so be ready for it, take notes. And then he can follow up with an email and say, this is what we discussed, this is my plan, and is it okay? And that can be a post hoc controlling the narrative, where she may have said a bunch of things, but he can put back in what he understood from it, so then she would know what he understood. And an important point for the postdoc or any trainee is that asking for clarification is not a sign of incompetence. And so that should be very clear. Asking questions is a good thing, and scientists should always ask questions. And there's no such thing as stupid questions, because not asking a question is the worst thing, because asking questions is important and not a sign of competence, because you're there to train. You don't know everything already, which is why you're there to train. So your whole goal should be to learn, and not feel like, oh, I can't ask questions. So
I want to spend one hot second on the inconvenience part. I'm a Midwesterner, so like we never inconvenience anybody as if we can avoid it. Introverts look at their shoes and extroverts look at other people's shoes. But the thing that's inconvenient for me as a PI is if 6 months go by that I think you understand what you're doing and what you're working on, and you didn't. That's inconvenient. If I'm talking to you every week like this, it's fine. Let's do that thing. So there is no short-term inconvenience. Like if I wanted to I wouldn't be in this job if all I wanted to do was drive other people to do science and walk away from it. I'm there as an educator and as a mentor, and that's why we do this part. So it's never inconvenient. It's only inconvenient over time. So you can't inconvenience me in a week. We inconvenience each other if 3, 4, 5 months goes by and we don't know that we're not speaking the same language.
Yeah. and also iterate the same point that I've made in both scenarios, that at the end of the day, this is for your science. You're doing this for science and for your career. And so it is not inconvenience. And the PI has a lab and has taken on a new postdoc. And so the thing about she's busy with her own work is running the lab and training the next generation. So it is all part of the same mission. And so postdoc is part of the same mission. The PI is part of the same mission. The undergrad in the lab is part of the same mission. We're all in the same mission to understand better about human health and make things better. And so as soon as the mission is clear and it's the same for everyone, then we're all colleagues trying to get there and learn in the process. And so it is not about inconvenience or him or her or things like that. So a lot of it is about just the goal, reorganizing the goal, and both the postdoc and the PI can do that.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Are there any other comments or questions from the audience before we move on to the next scenario?
Well,
And please also think of other questions that you want to ask and put that in the chat, because the interaction score put together these 4 scenarios, but we also wanted to leave plenty of time for additional questions and comments from the group. So.
All right.
I was just going to add that I thought the scenario confused me a little bit because, like Nathan and Indira said, the postdoc should be stronger for himself, should be advocating for himself. And so, but there are personality types that we've all seen this before. And so this boils down to preventing this problem from happening by either, training the postdoc as a graduate student that he needs to take control over his future like this, or setting the record straight as soon as he joins the lab. But yeah, I mean, I certainly know people like this, and all you can do is encourage them to ask questions.
Yeah. The other question, I guess it should be important to mention also, is cultural. You talked about Midwest culture, Nathan, but also people come from other cultures. They feel like it's disrespectful to weigh in, or they don't exactly know how to weigh in, or they feel like their language they're not as comfortable in English to really follow. So that could be one of these situations. And certainly, I've had many discussions with the foreign postdocs who have this thing, and so with them I say, just do a lot of things by email, discuss things by email, and so don't leave the main discussions for in person, because then you feel like, because by email you can organize your thoughts and you can ask specific questions and then maybe set the meeting up. And then follow up again with emails, because then you are back in control, and also less overwhelming that, oh my God, I'm not quite following everything they're saying. And it could also be that, maybe she has a very thick accent and he can't understand exactly what she said. And so again, written communication is a great way to, and yes, some of us who are extroverts like to talk in person, but others probably would prefer to talk in writing, and I think it's fine, as long as communication is happening and the project is moving forward. I mean, at the end of the day, that's everyone's goal. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Okay, so we'll move on to the third scenario: personal life challenges affecting work. So a postdoc in your lab has a family emergency and he has to fly back home for the next, we'll say, month or so. This means he will not be able to perform one last experiment to help with an upcoming manuscript submission due in 1 week. How would you respond to this scenario?
Indira, you want to start? I was trying to switch back and forth, right? Because you went first on the first one too.
Okay, sorry, sure. Yeah, this is definitely a thing, for people going back and maybe they're gone for, let's say, a month, or there's maternity leave or some other personal illness and so on. So this happens, and this kind of harkens back to the scenario number 1 too, because if someone else steps in and does a bunch of experiments, then how is that credit also given? For me, I think I deal with these things because these things happen, and especially if you're in academia for a long time, the course of your career, these things will definitely happen, good reasons and like babies, but also or family health reasons. But everyone in my group works as a team. For every aspect, there's one driver, but there's at least 3 or 4 colleagues or collaborators. And so if one person is gone, then the other person can fill in for them. And they're and so especially if it's like one last experiment type of thing. And the team works on mutual trust and respect. And so they know that if the one person finishes a blot for them or a stain for them, that they trust that. So that's how I proactively have dealt with it, because people, or sometimes students have like their TAC meeting or the thesis committee meeting or a QE. There are many reasons why somebody is suddenly not available for a while. So I do it as teams, so they can support and fill in for each other. More like actually, since I started my faculty position in a clinical department in OBGYN, really sort of took on a lot of things that I learned from there, because like OR teams or clinical care teams, they're teams. And yes, you have your main doctor, but other people can step in. So it's not like if you need support, there's nobody there because your one doctor is gone or not around. And so and everybody contributes to making that patient healthy. And so I've really sort of taken that philosophy to running the lab, and it's been extremely efficient, and everybody gets something out of it. Everybody trains, everybody gets opportunities, and the science moves forward at a much faster pace than if everything is on one person's head. So I guess I'll let others weigh in, because I have had the situation that people are gone for a month or 2 months, but I have not had the situation where it's been an issue. So
what are you going to do? Right? This is a family crisis. There's something going on. What are you going to do? Are you going to be a jerk about it? No. Like, your student will never forget that you were a complete jerk when they had to go home because part of someone in their family is dear to them is dying or what have you. They will remember that forever. You don't want to be that person. You let them go. You delay. God forbid, I might even do the experiment for them. It's probably not going to go well anymore, but you just cover. These are the things where if you spend your time being mad about, you're gonna just spend a lot of time being mad. I as a PI, I have kids, right? So that's sort of yesterday, my son had 103.6 temperature. I'm like, guys, I'm not gonna be here. And no choice. My wife couldn't cover, so I did. We traded. It's just what happens. There's nothing you can do. And you have to accept the fact that some things are just out of your control. All you can do is control what happens afterward.
Any examples from the audience about, because what if it's a critical piece of experiment for a grant, that you need? Have people dealt with it differently?
Very talkative group today.
Yeah, I was going to say, anybody get massive amounts of flack for how much time they took off after their children were born?
And 4 kids.
Yeah.
Manisha?
Yeah, I honestly believe the question is nicely covered, and I really like the fact that what are you going to do, and then have a team like that. That backup thing has worked for me as well. I also, hopefully I'm not interrupting this. These are great scenarios. I had a different question, and if that's okay, I can bring that up because I have experts right now and I really need to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So first of all, thank you, Dr. Mysorekar and Dr. Tykocki, for this sort of mentoring session for it. It's extremely valuable for researchers like me. So my question basically is, would you advise an assistant professor level researcher to take the risk of changing their field of research when they are first establishing a lab? And I asked this because I made that transition myself, moving from prostate cancer field to BPH. It took considerable amount of time to, build everything from ground up, collaboration with clinicians, IRB protocols, organoid system setup, and more. although I eventually managed to establish these connections, the process honestly was nerve-wracking. And I'm still struggling to secure the grant funding, which ultimately decides the future of my lab, right? So I was wondering if there is a better way to navigate that situation. That's what my... Did I ask something I should not have asked?
No, no,
Oops.
no, no. Thinking about it. So I guess it would have to be a little bit more about what your goals were that made you switch. What was the, I guess, the evidence-based decision matrix that you chose to do that? Did you identify collaborators and resources and opportunities ahead of time before switching over? And are they still in place? Or and I guess it would be a little bit more, because sometimes we have to switch and sometimes we have to pivot, because either we're frozen out or there's a competitor or a colleague that you're not able to work in a field anymore, or especially at that institution. But then before moving, you have to have things laid out. And I mean, I didn't switch. I've stayed on with my bladder research program, but I did, as a second year assistant professor, move into a completely new field of placental biology. And one of the things that I did, and it's partly because I was in the Department of OBGYN, but also because I brought in all my infectious disease mucosal immunology background, and they really wanted me to apply that to the placenta. So there was some push from my chair and from people in maternal fetal medicine to do this. But I negotiated with my chair, because I said, you gave me my startup to do my work in the bladder. Now, if I do all these things, which is a whole new field for me, and if I commit to it, then I commit wholeheartedly. And then I do all this, and then it takes a long time, and then I'm delayed on my actual program that you recruited me for, then I don't want to be held responsible for not making a lot of progress. So I lucked out because I got an extra $150,000 to move into this new area, and a complete support that I was doing this because they were pushing me. Because I like people to remember, like, that's like, this is not me just randomly doing something. This is anyway, it worked out for me, and that both of my programs, that program really took off, and it's been just fantastic for my life. But I think, yes, pivoting sometimes is necessary for good reasons or bad reasons or negative reasons. But having a established path, whether it's a collaborator or a mentor, or a specific resource, or targeting a specific mechanism, is important, because again, it's about empowerment, because shit happens, we can't help that. Things happen, we have to deal with it, but we can take a very intentional evidence-based approach to pivoting, because pivoting doesn't have to be random. It can be very intentional in a way that you're primed for success in the new area. And especially coming from prostate cancer, moving to BPH, you're still in the same organ. You're working with the same cells. And you move away potentially from the more cancer transformed cell line, et cetera, and drug discovery type of thing, to be more immunological basic mechanisms potentially. But then you could, you have such a huge community over here, so you can like support yourself, like surround yourself with all of us, or those of us who are working on the prostate, and someone to send you samples, someone to give you mice, or someone to give you antibodies, and create a community, and there you can build up from there. And then your institution knows that you moved from one area to another area, but it was intentional, and you have a huge community supporting you. So
yeah, Manisha, the topic we're talking about today is topic that I talk about also when I talk about negotiation and establishing
yeah
collaboration. And it's really a fine line between this, right? Of conflict resolution is inherent in collaboration. And so what I think about is did you do it the wrong way? No. Any way you would have told me of how you did it, and if you asked me if you did it the wrong way, I would have said no. You did it the way that you needed to. But you did bring up a good point that we don't think about. These 7 points that I started this with about conflict resolution, we tend to think of being top down. They're also bottom up. And so
Uh-huh.
when you have, I think, to put it in a different way, Indira had this conversation with her chair, and all of what you're saying, these ideas of finding the right time and place to talk about this, all of those things there work when the power imbalance is the other way as well. So you can drive this sort of conflict resolution from the person that could have the conflict from, like student to mentor or me to my chair. It's not just I as a PI, I should use these 7 steps when I have 2 people fighting in my lab. And so these are things to hang on for that. And I agree with Indira is like have those conversations that it's clear that you have the chance. I mean, I'm like her. I'm as diversified portfolio. I mean, I'm a student doing vascular biology. We're doing biomechanics. We're doing neuroscience. We're doing whatever might get me a dollar. And so just keep at it. You got it. Just make sure that I have a chair that's super supportive of that, and just make sure like that's clear between the two of you too.
Yeah.
All
And I think
right.
we touched on this just before we started our thing is that feeling empowered is very important, because often we feel victimized by our circumstances, situation, and general, potential, general always constant stress about funding and so on. But we went into this process knowing that it's uncertain and that there's going to be ups and downs. And so the important thing is to surround ourselves by amazing people, amazing colleagues and scientists who inspire you, and always have young people that you can inspire and be inspired by, and stay in touch with the next generation things, and be very intentional, because within any circumstances, there's always something that you can do. Sometimes you can do big things. And yes, I had a very supportive chair, so I got my extra money. But if I didn't have a supportive chair, then I wouldn't have had that. But I still would have made the point that I'm doing this for them. They want something from me, which means that I have something on them, right? So I could have an opportunity, or they could send me for training in this new area or something or the other. There's many, many ways. And so again, where are you going with your new area? Why are you in this new area? What are the burning questions that you want to answer? And how best can you answer it? If you have millions, you can answer many ways. But if you only have thousands, you can answer in some other ways. But your question, you can still be in pursuit of your mission and your question. You can scale up or down. Like if you had millions, you'd probably do a whole bunch of omics and spatial and Visium, right? You'll spend $1 million on that. But if you didn't have that, maybe you do more single immunostaining, but you're still answering your question. So.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks for
Well,
asking
thank
the
you.
question.
Thank you both for that. So we have one more scenario to get through. And this is actually a really interesting one. It's related to work environment and personal life conflict. So the scenario is I'm a postdoc and the father of a young child whom I need to pick up from daycare in the afternoons. Our project manager keeps scheduling in-person team meetings in the late afternoon, and despite me informing her that I am unable to attend the meetings, wait a minute, she refused to change the time or format. Additionally, at the last team meeting, the team decided that for the next conference, someone else will travel and present my work, citing my parental responsibilities as a barrier to travel. I am able to travel for work if given advance notice and my PI is aware of that. How do I navigate this scenario? It's a tricky one.
It's tricky one.
Yeah. I mean, it is, but it isn't.
Yeah.
It's a tricky bit of work that, so again, it's these 7 points, right? Empathy is a key one. And understanding that the people that you work with priorities and yours aren't always going to align. And at that hot moment, you got to decide what's best for your lab, not what's best for the way you always do things. If it means paying attention and moving a meeting for an hour earlier, so be it. That's what needs to be best for your team. And I tell people this too about people that try to work 14-hour days. Don't. Right? Because At the end of that, something's going to start going wrong. And now you're not going to know why. And same thing here. You're pushing this person to do things that is causing complications for them in the life that doesn't really affect their ability to complete their science.
Yes.
Let people work their time, let people work their place. Unless it's a huge problem for my sphere to move that meeting an hour, then do it. And my goodness, especially about the last thing about travel, never be punitive like this. That sounds like a punishment, right? You couldn't be at these meetings, so now you don't get to go somewhere. Um, Decide what means is what earns these things is not the way that it works, right? You give these people space, we give each other space. We expect our students to give us space to do what we need because that's important. The trainees to do the same. And so I have found you get a lot more distance and mileage out of being a little bit flexible and asking yourself, is this really important that we do this way? Is it really something that means it must be done at this time and this sort of thing? Or can we give people the space, especially with, I'm real sensitive about this parenting thing one as a guy that comes in at 6:30 in the morning because I leave at 3:30 to pick up my son. That this is exactly how I've set it up. And I have people that work noon to 9. That's just how it goes. And it's having that flexibility and that openness to realize, is your ire about something really founded in something to be mad about, or are you just mad that it's not what you would do?
Yeah. Well, Chris has a point, has a comment, but I also wanted to say that something like this, not the scheduling meetings, but because in person is a new term, right? Back in the day, it was all in person. But it was a thing as when I was a postdoc that my people assumed that I wasn't going to travel because I was a young mother. And then this other postdoc who was very competitive with me, went and presented my work and didn't even inform me. And so because I had shared my slides with my PI, and then he just gave it to this guy, and then that guy went and presented it. But anyway, the thing is, well, and I didn't know until later. But once I realized that had happened, then I talked to my PI about it and said, look, this is. I'm academy bound too. This is an incredible opportunity, and I have a full support system to go. And so this should not be assumed about me. And back in the day, this was something that would be assumed for a woman, but now men and women are pretty much almost in the same place, right, Nathan? I mean,
Yeah.
most of our male postdocs. There's no difference between them or female postdocs or students in terms of like childcare and when they need to go and being able to travel. So this is a real thing. And I mean, I guess the thing is, yeah, I mean, who's the project manager? Is that the PI? And if that's the PI, then you have to have conversations like there's many ways to contribute and to let them know, like I did, that I have support, so I can and will travel and want to travel. And so no one else needs to present my work. And at least I should have the right to say yes or no, and that should not be assumed for me. But
Yeah, Chris, Chris,
Chris
Chris
also
brought up a
has
good point.
yeah,
Yeah, she brought up a good point in the chat about what if it's always this one person that gets to be unfair for the others?
yeah.
Does that occur?
What
Yeah.
if you said meetings should all be at 7 a.m. because I'm there, and that's not convenient for people who are dropping their kids off at 8:30, right? So it's
You do run a balance of, are we conveniencing one to inconvenience all of the rest? My experience, my personal experience is, of course, is that that scenario is the exception, not the rule. And if you're building a laboratory culture where everyone feels that they have this shared interest in being there and being a part of it, but everyone has that opportunity to ask these questions, you can get to get that little bit of leeway. You can beat that a little bit, get around it. It seems is more open. But the question becomes, is it real? Is it uh, uh, realistic to make these considerations? What I definitely have had is people asking for things that are wholly unrealistic, right? We
yeah,
cannot have lab meeting on Saturday afternoon. Full stop. Like, we just don't do that sort of thing. I have made that commitment to my people that their weekends are theirs. If they really want to come and work, I'm not going to stop them, but I don't have a 7 day a week expectation. Those sorts of things are things that are a mentoring issue and a conflict resolution issue that is a private matter that you need to talk about in terms of your interpersonal relationships. So yes, that does happen, but I have found that if, if you build your team in a with a certain culture that is acknowledges this, that happens fewer than it does also often.
And Kate has a comment about, she's a postdoc, about how, as a PI, how do you navigate working with colleagues that don't share the same values? And that is, of course, tricky. But I guess the main thing that I would always go back to, even in this scenario, is what are all your contributions? Like, this is the project, this is the question for the project, and then this is the work that you're doing towards that project. And if you're a highly productive person who's really moving the needle on that project, then you have a better, you have a stronger position to say, look, then if you are not that crucial, are not producing that much, and also need adjustments or something, then there could be that there's a reason why you're not prioritized. I mean, that sounds bad, but it's, as a PI, we have to consider these things. We may have somebody who's like, go, 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 and then we have somebody who doesn't do that much, but then they still want to go present. And so you have to weigh those things. And also, again, but I always look at what the point of all of this is, which is to be going out and communicating. And so somebody who goes out there and communicates and shares science and goes and asks questions for other people and interacts with people and represents your group and puts your name out there and networks, then you have value added. If someone just goes and gives their talk and then leaves and it's okay, they went and talked, they got that opportunity, but they didn't really potentially go out there and represent you. So there's things to weigh, especially as our opportunities are limited. But I know, Nathan, do you want to take Kate's question? I didn't quite answer that question.
Yeah, no, Kate, when it comes to this, I will not co-mentor with somebody that doesn't have at least pretty similar values, full stop. Because that's not fair to you. So when choosing mentorship, you choose the mentor, not the project, as best you can. And when I have these issues, these are issues that go above it. And I'm a little more firm. This isn't a conflict resolution issue to me. This is this is an issue of leadership and mentorship style. And I have the things that are dear to me as my core beliefs and who the lab is. And I won't compromise on some things. And a lot of that involves around how people are treated. So I won't co-mentor as a PI. If I know that that person doesn't share these values, I won't, because it's just not good for you. The mentee is never going to work out. And if a mentee is in this situation that I did see and it does go this way, I advocate for them. So this is not a conflict resolution. I would see this particular situation you described as something that a trainee in any shape or a postdoc should be bouncing one against the other. This is a problem that the mentor should sort out on your behalf. You don't need to put yourself through that. And I would. And frankly, if I was co-mentoring someone and this became an issue in this exact instance, I would be well inclined to offer to no longer be co-mentoring, but solo mentoring if that's what they needed. And that is way off the script of what is those 7 ideas that I had this whole thing about. But that sort of conflict to me is a little bit different way around it. That's helping out. That's helping you find what you need.